Welcome to your deep dive. This time we're going down the Google rabbit hole with you. Looks like you're ready to crack the code on how Google search really works.
Always a worthy endeavor.
And you've brought in some interesting, shall we say, spirited source material to dissect. Someone's fired up about Google's lies strong words.
It definitely piqued my curiosity.
Right.
Let's see if their SEO rant still holds water in 2024, or if their gripes are as outdated as those dancing baby GIFs we used to love.
Right. Google's come a long way since then. All right, our source kicks things off, swinging calling out Google for saying one thing and doing another. Backlinks, content freshness, even how you name those cat pics on your website. Apparently, it all matters.
It's true, those factors play a role in how Google understands and ranks your website. But let's break down some of these lies and see what holds up.
Okay, let's unpack this, because you know I love a good teardown. Our source claims Google is still painfully literal. Does that mean I have to stuff my website with keywords like it's 1999?
Keyword stuffing is definitely a relic of the past. Google's algorithms are much more sophisticated now. They're getting better at understanding context and user intent.
So it's not just about shoving in keywords wherever they fit.
Exactly. Think about it. When you search for something on Google, do you just type in a jumble of random words?
No, I'm usually trying to find a specific answer or solve a problem.
Precisely. And Google's algorithms are getting better at recognizing those patterns. They're looking for websites that provide relevant, comprehensive answers to those questions.
So should I just ignore keywords altogether?
Not necessarily. Keywords are still important for signaling to Google what your content is about. But instead of stuffing them in unnaturally, focus on using them organically within well-written, informative content. Think about what a real person would search for, not just a robot crawling your site.
That makes sense. So it's about finding that sweet spot between being clear for Google and engaging for humans.
Exactly. You want your content to rank well, but you also want people to actually enjoy reading it.
Okay, speaking of things people should enjoy reading, our source is obsessed with titles and meta descriptions. Are those really still make or break in 2024?
They might not be the only factors, but they're still incredibly important. Think of them as your website's first impression. Imagine you're walking into a crowded bookstore.
Ooh, I love bookstores. So many possibilities.
Right. And you're met with a sea of book covers. What's going to make you pick one up and actually read the back?
Probably a catchy title and an intriguing blurb.
Exactly. It's the same with your website. The title and meta description are your chance to grab Google's attention and entice users to click through to your site. They should be clear, concise, and pique the reader's interest.
So no pressure, right? It's like writing a whole novel in 2 sentences or less. Our source also claimed even a perfectly optimized site will tank if it's slow. Is speed really that crucial?
Think about your own browsing habits. How long are you willing to wait for a web page to load?
Honestly, not long. If it takes more than a few seconds, I'm probably hitting that back button.
Exactly. We live in a world of instant gratification. People are busy and they have short attention spans. A slow website is a recipe for a high bounce rate.
Which is bad news for anyone who wants their website to be seen.
Right. Google knows that slow loading times lead to bad user experiences. And their goal is to serve up the best possible results to their users.
So speed isn't just about SEO, it's about respecting your audience's time. Now, this is where things get really interesting, at least according to our source. They claim you can game the system by being the first to cover breaking news. Is that legit?
It's true that Google prioritizes fresh content, especially for trending topics. Think about it. If you're searching for information on a breaking news story, you want the most up-to-date information right.
Absolutely. I don't want to be reading last week's news when something major just happened.
Exactly. So Google's algorithms are designed to surface the most recent and relevant content for those types of searches. Being the first to publish a well-researched, informative piece on a breaking topic can give you a serious edge.
So it's like winning the Google news cycle. But our source also seems to be implying that you could exploit this by chasing every fleeting trend. Is that a good strategy?
That's where things get a bit trickier. While jumping on breaking news can give you a temporary boost, it's not a sustainable long-term strategy. You risk spreading yourself too thin and becoming a jack-of-all-trades, master of none.
Okay, that makes sense. You don't want to compromise the quality and depth of your content just to chase a fleeting moment of Google fame.
Exactly. Google values authority and trustworthiness. They want to see that you're a reliable source of information in your niche. Chasing every fleeting trend can dilute that authority.
So should our listener just ignore the siren song of breaking news altogether?
Not necessarily. If a trending topic aligns perfectly with your expertise and you can provide unique insights, then go for it. But don't sacrifice quality for speed. Focus on delivering well-researched, accurate, and in-depth content. Google will reward you for it in the long run.
That's a good reminder. All right, moving on to another point that caught my eye. Our source brought up a pretty intriguing example of how search results can be manipulated through coordinated efforts. They even went so far as to call it a conspiracy. Now, I'm not one for conspiracy theories, but this definitely piqued my interest.
It's understandable to be skeptical, but this speaks to the constant tug of war between ethical SEO practices and those trying to exploit the system.
So there are people out there actively trying to trick Google. What do they gain from that?
It's all about manipulating perception to drive traffic and potentially profit. For some, it's about pushing an agenda. For others, it might be about getting a leg up on the competition, even if it means bending the rules.
That seems shady.
It can be. The example our listener provided likely involved tactics like creating artificial backlinks or generating a ton of mentions across the internet to trick Google into thinking a website or piece of content is more popular or influential than it really is.
So it's like creating a fake fan club to make a band seem more popular than they really are.
You could say that.
Yeah.
But remember, Google is aware of these tactics, and they're constantly refining their algorithms to combat manipulation.
So it's a high-stakes game of cat and mouse between those trying to game the system and Google trying to maintain a level playing field.
That's one way to look at it. And it's a good reminder that while understanding SEO is essential for getting your content seen, it's equally crucial to prioritize ethical practices.
All right, one last thing before we move on from this section. Our source seems really hung up on the idea that you need to treat Google like it can't understand anything unless it's spelled out super clearly. They specifically called out image alt tags and file names. Why all the fuss over images?
It comes back to the fact that Google, as smart as it is, isn't human yet. It relies on the information we provide to understand what our content is about, and images are no exception.
So even though Google can see the image, it doesn't necessarily understand what it's looking at without our help.
Exactly. That's where alt tags and descriptive file names come in. By providing clear, concise descriptions of what's in the image, you're essentially teaching Google what it's seeing.
And that helps Google connect the image to relevant searches.
Yes. Not only can this lead to your images appearing in Google image searches, but it can also boost your overall page ranking.
Because now Google has a better understanding of the content and context of your website as a whole. It all ties together.
Think of it like this. You're putting together a giant jigsaw puzzle for Google, and those image descriptions are the missing pieces that help complete the picture.
Okay, that's a great analogy. I'm starting to see how all these little details can add up to make a big difference. So we've talked about keywords, titles, descriptions, speed, and even image optimization. But what about backlinks? Our source seemed convinced those are still a huge GE deal.
They are absolutely still a cornerstone of Google's algorithm. It's one of the primary ways Google assesses a website's credibility and authority. Think of it like a vote of confidence from one site to another.
So the more websites that link back to my content, the more Google trusts that I'm a reliable source.
Essentially, yes. It's a signal to Google that other people in your niche find your content valuable and worth sharing.
But couldn't someone just create a bunch of spammy websites and link back to their content? Is it really that easy to manipulate?
You're right to be thinking critically about this. While it might have worked in the early days of SEO, Google's gotten much better at detecting unnatural linking patterns. They're looking for quality over quantity.
So it's not just about how many backlinks I have, but who's linking back to me.
Exactly. A single backlink from a highly authoritative and relevant website in your niche is worth far more than hundreds of backlinks from low-quality, irrelevant sites.
That makes sense. So it's about earning those backlinks organically through high-quality content and building genuine relationships with others in your field.
You've got it. Now, speaking of making it easy for Google to understand your website, our source also mentioned something called human-readable URLs. What's that all about?
Yeah, I was wondering about that too. Is that just a fancy way of saying don't use a bunch of random characters in your web address?
Essentially, yes. It's about creating URLs that are easy for both humans and search engines to understand.
So instead of something cryptic like website.com/blog/24897JFK2, it should be more like website.com/blog/Google-search secrets.
Perfect example. The second URL clearly tells you what the page is about. making it more likely that you'll click on it.
It's like choosing a book with a clear title and an intriguing synopsis versus one with a blank cover and no description.
Exactly. A human-readable URL sets the expectation for the user and makes them more likely to engage with your content. And it signals to Google what the page is about, which helps with ranking.
Okay, I'm getting the picture. Clear, concise, and descriptive is the name of the game. Our source also seemed really passionate about the importance of formatting tags. Things like headings and bullet points.
Hmm.
Is that still relevant? I thought Google had moved past caring about that kind of stuff.
It's true that Google's algorithms have evolved, but formatting tags are still very relevant for a couple of key reasons. First, they help Google understand the hierarchy and structure of your content.
So instead of seeing a wall of text, Google sees clearly defined sections with headings and subheadings that break down the information.
Precisely. Those headings act like signposts, guiding Google and human readers through your content and highlighting the key takeaways.
And that makes the information more digestible and easier to understand. What was the second reason?
Well, even though Google is getting better at understanding the nuances of human language, it still appreciates a little help in understanding what's most important. Formatting tags provide that extra layer of context.
So it's not just about aesthetics, although that matters too. It's about making your content accessible and easy for Google to digest.
Absolutely. Think about it from a user's perspective. A well-formatted article with clear headings, bullet points, and images is much more inviting to read than a dense block of text.
Okay, that makes sense. It's all about creating a positive user experience, which ultimately benefits your SEO as well. Now, last but not least, our source had some very strong opinions about content freshness. They even went so far as to suggest trend surfing to game the system. What are your thoughts on that?
We touched on this a bit earlier when we were talking about breaking news. It's true that Google loves fresh content, especially for news and trending topics. But as we discussed, chasing every fleeting trend can backfire.
Because you end up spreading yourself too thin and potentially compromising the quality of your content, right?
Exactly. It's more sustainable and ultimately more rewarding to focus on your niche and consistently provide valuable content that stands the test of time.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners? Should they just ignore trending topics altogether?
Not necessarily. If a trending topic perfectly aligns with your area of expertise, and you can provide unique insights or valuable information, by all means cover it. But don't sacrifice quality for speed. Don't chase trends just for the sake of chasing trends.
So it's all about finding that balance between staying relevant and staying true to your brand and expertise.
Exactly. And remember, creating high-quality content takes time and effort. Don't rush the process. Google recognizes and rewards well-researched, in-depth content that provides genuine value to the reader.
Our source seemed particularly fixated on this idea that Google was lying about how much they care about fresh content. They even cited a specific example where it seemed like older content was consistently outranking newer content. What's the deal with that? Is Google being shady?
Not necessarily. While it's true that Google prioritizes fresh content, especially for time-sensitive searches, it's not the only factor at play. Remember, Google's ultimate goal is to provide the most relevant and helpful results to its users.
So if that means showing an older piece of content that's more comprehensive, more authoritative, and more aligned with the user's search intent, Google might prioritize that over a newer piece of content that's less relevant.
Exactly. Think about it like this. You're searching for a recipe for chocolate chip cookies. Are you going to be more interested in a brand new recipe that hasn't been tested or reviewed yet, or a classic recipe that's been shared thousands of times, has hundreds of positive reviews, and even includes helpful tips from other bakers?
I'm going with the classic recipe every time.
Exactly. And Google's algorithms are designed to make similar judgments. They look at factors like backlinks, user engagement time spent on page, and overall content quality to determine which piece of content is most likely to satisfy the user's search query.
So just because a piece of content is newer doesn't automatically give it an advantage.
Exactly. It's about the bigger picture, the overall value and relevance of the content, not just its age.
So I guess our source's claims about Google lying aren't entirely accurate. It seems like they're just focusing on one small piece of a much larger puzzle.
That's a great way to put it. It's easy to get caught up in the technicalities of SEO, but it's important to remember that Google's ultimate goal is to connect users with the most helpful and relevant information.
It seems like a lot of the frustration our source feels stems from not understanding the why behind Google's methods. But when you explain it, those choices actually make a lot of sense. It's about serving up the best user experience, not just rewarding the newest content.
Precisely. And remember, Google's algorithms are constantly evolving. What works today might not work tomorrow, which can be frustrating for anyone trying to keep up.
So how can our listeners stay ahead of the curve? Where do you even begin to find reliable information in the ever-changing world of SEO?
That's a great question. It's easy to get overwhelmed with all the information and misinformation out there.
Oh, tell me about it. Everyone and their dog claims to have the SEO secrets. It's hard to know who to trust.
Exactly. It's crucial to be discerning about your sources. Stick with reputable SEO blogs, industry experts who've earned their stripes. And of course, Google's own webmaster guidelines are a must-read.
So don't just trust every random article or YouTube guru promising you the SEO secrets to instant ranking success.
Precisely. Look for sources with a proven track record, a deep understanding of how search engines work, and a commitment to ethical practices.
That makes sense. You don't want to get caught up in some fly-by-night SEO scheme that might work temporarily but ultimately backfires in the long run.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to experiment.
Experiment.
Absolutely. Every website is different, so what works for one might not work for another. Track your results, analyze what's working, and adjust your strategies accordingly.
It's like being a detective, but instead of solving crimes, you're unlocking the secrets of Google's algorithm.
I like that analogy. It's about piecing together the clues, testing your hypotheses, and constantly refining your approach.
So to wrap things up for our listener who's eager to improve their website and climb those Google rankings, any final pearls of wisdom?
Remember, SEO is not about tricking Google. It's about understanding how it works, speaking its language, and creating content that aligns with those goals. It's about providing value to your audience while also considering how search engines operate.
It's like learning a new language, but instead of grammar rules, you're mastering keywords, backlinks, and user experience.
Precisely. And just like learning any new language, it takes time, effort, and a willingness to adapt.
And maybe a healthy dose of patience.
Absolutely. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither is a top-ranking website.
That's a great point to end on. For our listener, remember that creating quality content and building a strong online presence is a marathon, not a sprint. Stay curious, stay informed, and keep refining your approach. You've got this.
Couldn't have said it better myself.